And now we have the man of the hour as well. During this thing, I was muting people. I am going to ask now to unmute. Ipyan, I muted you as well. If you would unmute yourself as well.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, they're beautiful, brother.
All there right. You go. I'm all learning this technology thing.
Hey, brother, and we so glad.
Oh no, not
bruh.
No, not him. This is gonna be an argument.
You just get up in the morning and be like, where that brother? Let me troll him. I'm gonna get him.
I enjoy debating with you, brother. It's always on a high intellectual
absolutely,
level,
man.
Regardless of which way we coming.
Collectors in arms, man. I'm trying to be like you. You know that.
Man, listen. Man, you see that new piece I got?
Yeah, man.
Woo!
I got one lined up tomorrow, man. I'm like this. I ain't got no money.
Listen, as soon as that piece sold at Swan the other day, I hit the button on that other piece. I said, I made some money, I'm spending some money.
Come on, man. You know how the collectors do.
You know how we do.
I know.
And I got a few dollars left over to pay a bill or two, so I'm happy. Good to be on with you, brothers.
Good, man.
Absolutely. Long time coming. So, for those who may be a little bit slow, obviously, this is Danny Simmons, right? I've been, interested in this brother for a long time. When I began seeing him, he was just one of them dudes, I'm going to say like a cool cat, and it's funny too, because we're going to get into the thing, and I told you this a little bit in our discussions before, but, for an older guy, your swag is like unparalleled. You always got some fly gear on, some jackets, some shirts, some pants. I mean, I've seen you turn your own artwork into jackets and stuff. I mean, you are you're like avant-garde, hip hop. I mean, it's you really have created quite a image for yourself, and really, brother, it's a beautiful thing to see. And hopefully in this conversation, discussion, interview / we'll get really to some of this. And really, I want to start off.
Listen, I'm here to talk about what you want to talk about. I'm the guest, so I'm going to act like a guest and follow your lead.
Beautiful. So the best place to begin is generally the beginning.
Yep.
So I want to talk about your early life, and
sure.
Just from basic research, I see that both of your parents were educators, right?
Yep.
And Pops was a history teacher.
He was a history teacher. Well, listen, he graduated with his master's in history from Howard, and it was in African American history or Negro history at the time. And but he never got a chance to really teach that in his early years, not until later. When he came to New York, he was the only place he could get a job at with his master's from Howard was being a social worker. But one of the things, and he used to tell me about that, and one of the things he told me is that across from him sat the great Romare Bearden. So Romare Bearden had a desk on this side, and their desks faced each other. So they used to talk shit all day, him and Romare Bearden.
What?
So that when I found that out, that was inspiration. But one thing, my father, more importantly to my development, was my father was always a two-job kind of dude. So on Saturdays and Sunday mornings, he would work at the children's shelter with the kids in Jamaica, Queens on Union Hall Street. I don't know if it's still there, probably not. But he insisted on taking me there so I would understand that not everybody was as fortunate as we were. To have a mother and a father. He was taking me to kids that had no place to go but this shelter. And they were on their own. And he would just drop me off in the middle of the shelter with the kids, and he'd go on about his business doing his job. And so I learned at an early age, not necessarily how to understand beyond people's circumstances to who they were. This was taught to me. That my father was like, and I'm gonna just talk. He said, nigga, don't ever be a pussy lip nigga, which meant don't be jive, don't be fake. People are people, you be yourself, and forget everybody else, what they want, what they expect, this, that, and the other. Human beings are human beings. And that was his philosophy about life. He used to get off the bus on Hollis Avenue to all the gangsters and all the hoods. Mr. Simmons, what's up? And you talked about my style. My father stayed clean. You know, that was his job. He was at Howard University when David Dinkins, the mayor of New York, came in as a freshman. My father was an upper class, well, he had just started graduate school. And David and my father used to hang out because my father used to get all the girls. And he was a poet also. So he would be sitting under some tree at Howard reading poetry and macking. So that's who my dad was. So that's my inspiration, mostly in a lot of the stuff I did. At 6 years old, I was on civil rights demonstrations with him and marches. And so was Russell. Russell would be on his shoulders and I'd be in his hand. And we'd be marching around out in Queens and in different places, singing freedom songs, you know, and all of that stuck with me. The pursuit of social justice, the pursuit of being just a regular person. It stuck with me. He's like, I don't care what you get in life. If you ain't regular, you ain't shit. And that was his attitude. And it stuck with me.
So already right there, you done answered about 7 questions in one. You know what I mean? So right there, you know, we get the fashion sense. We get the importance of education, the importance of history, a love for poetry, a love for fashion and looking clean and presenting yourself well. Also, too, the lifelong lesson of not being no jive ass nigga. You know, those type of things, you know, keeping it real. Now it's funny, too, because being it, as you said, Pops kept it clean, and we know how you get down with the fashion. Now, what did you think when young brother Joey came home with sneakers with no laces in them?
Oh, I love, you know, listen, when I turned 16, I took my first, either 15 or 16, took my first hit of acid. And, you know, I became even more open-minded to what, so his sneakers with no laces wasn't nothing to me, man. As a matter of fact, you know, they Run DMC, Russell, all of them, Curtis, all the early rappers that Russell was running with, even before Def Jam, when it was just Rush Productions, or even before he even had formerly Rush Productions, when he was just running around with flyers, they'd all come to my house at 4 o'clock in the morning, buy some weed and get high and go to sleep. And then wake up in my crib. I had my own crib over in Rochdale Village when I was 21. So I guess Russell was 4 years younger than me. I guess he was 17 at the time. And so, you know, all of them cats would be at my house. And Joey would be there too. He was 11 years younger than me, so he was 10, and he was watching all of this too. So, I mean, when Run DMC, I used to go to all the early concerts. I used to hang out with him. And Russell really wanted me to, because we did a lot of stuff. We really grew up together. We had bunk beds. We slept in the same room for many, many years. He wanted me to be his partner early on in music, but I knew my path was something different. So I supported him, but I never really wanted to be a part of that. You know, I'd go to the shows and I'd love to be able to get in and say, I'm Russell's brother, and everybody step aside, but I didn't want to be a music person, nah.
Now let me ask you this too, because, you know, with all the famous family and whatnot, you know, I got a little joke for y'all. Like, okay, why you never claimed Earl Simmons?
Who is Earl Simmons?
That's DMX.
You know, I remember when him and Jay-Z both came out around the same time, and I liked DMX's music. It was raw. It was this. I met him once, but man, we wasn't claiming him. He would have got me in more trouble than I was already in. You know what I'm saying? I stayed in trouble up until I was 37 years old, man.
Everybody got a crazy cousin.
Yeah, he ain't my cousin, but he all right.
My cousin's on here now. He could tell you I'm the crazy cousin.
He's your cousin?
No. My cousin Aaron is on here now.
Oh, I thought you were talking about him.
No, I wish. No, please. That would have smoothed out my rap career somewhat. But let me ask you this. So, and you know, talking about, you know, kind of growing up, one of the things that I saw when Run had the cable series, Run's House.
Right.
that I really liked was really the sense of family and some of that real, you know, the regular stuff. And in one of those episodes, man, I gotta tell you, man, it made a thug cry. But it was when your young nephew, I think it was Diggy, not Russie. I think it was Diggy, stayed the night, and in your house with all,
they
with all
both
the
stayed
sculptures.
that night.
Okay. One of them I know was a little trepidatious because some of the sculptures or whatnot, you know what I mean? And the way that you broke it down and talked about the African art and like, these is our ancestors, these is our guardians, this is nothing to be scared of. I thought that was one of the most beautiful Black family moments I saw on television, you know?
Well, let me just say something, man. Everything I said was true, but them being scared of the African art, they wasn't scared of the African art. That was part of the script.
Okay.
It was like, okay, y'all act like y'all scared of the art, but the rap.
I fell for it like a sucker.
and part of that episode was, let's go get the White Castle. Man, they got in the limo and went on home. But anyway, but no, man, because those things, they don't tell you what to say, but they do have plot lines. So, you know, the thing was, they come over my house and hang out with Uncle Danny, because I'm the interesting uncle. Well, all of us is interesting, but differently interesting. And we had a great time, man, but they didn't actually spend the night. You know, it was the afternoon when we shot it, but they were very curious about the African art. So the conversation about it, but they weren't afraid of it, but the conversation about African art, which I've been collecting to this day, you know, is very real. And that those are our ancestors. There's nothing to be afraid of. People, we've been taught that our shrines, and it's not really art, these are religious objects and objects of power, are things to be afraid of. However, you know, if you ain't afraid of eating somebody's body and drinking their blood, you know, I don't see why you're afraid of a sculpture. But anyway, be that as it may, these are things that I feel comfortable with, these things around me.
And if you can go into that a little bit more, like, when did you really develop your love for art overall, and when did you really begin collecting, and, you know, particularly the African art?
I'll take you down that path. I developed my love. See, that side came from my mom's. My mom's was a painter. My father was a writer. He wrote poetry and he wrote a couple of novels. None of them were published. Some of the poems were. And my mom's was a painter, and that was basically, she taught preschool. And the big thing about our preschool class was teaching kids how to paint art and all of that stuff. So she used to bring art materials home and sit me down and teach me how to draw and to paint and this, that, and the other. And that's where I would draw the comic books. My favorite character to draw was Hulk. And then as I went on, I learned to do things, and I would watch her because she'd have a little tabletop easel and a little box of oil paints, and she'd be there painting and whatnot while dinner was cooking. She'd paint a little bit, and I would watch her intently. So that's where my love of it came from. But I really, in the beginning, wanted to be a writer because my father would walk around the house reciting poetry all day, and I had so many ideas in my head. I didn't really realize how I could transfer those ideas into painting. And so I was writing a lot of poetry, and I wrote 2 or 3 early novels. And then one day I got writer's block, and I broke out an old art set and started painting. And it struck me that the things I was trying to get out with words, I was getting out with paint. And it was really things about our community, but more spiritual than what was going on in our community, what the basis for our community, what the basis for our love for each other was, what the basis for our communication was. And I started looking towards African art because I realized that these things were conduits of spirit more than they were art just to look at. And so I started looking at those for spiritual connections. And that's when I started painting. So, and then I just continued to develop it. And then I really started, because I never went to art school. I went to school to be a social worker. And I started developing and doing my own research and meet artists. And I went out and met artists and this, that, and the other. Started going to art galleries and looking at other people's work. and just develop myself into being an artist. And eventually I wanted to be an artist so much I quit being a social worker. I just said, I'm not going to do it. And the greatest thing, the most empowering thing that ever happened was, Russell was already doing what he was doing and Run was Run. And I went to my mother and I said, listen, I don't want to do this social work thing anymore. I really want to be an artist. And she said, go ahead and paint. Nobody will let you starve. And, that starving artist type thing. And I took that and run with it. I already had a house. Me and Russell had bought a house. Then I bought his half from me. So half of his house, I had rent coming from that. And so I wasn't going to be on the street. I knew I had to scramble to pay the bills, but I figured art would do it. And so that's how I got my start. And then I opened my first gallery. When I bought the next house, I turned the ground floor into my first gallery called the Sanctuary Gallery in the middle of Bed-Stuy. So.
And then, so how did that evolve then into, Rush Arts?
Well, after Sanctuary Gallery, see, there's some wild shit. While I was doing that, I was a heroin addict. When I was doing all this, I was a social worker, heroin addict, blah, 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 blah. And so I went away to rehab. Russell said, enough is enough. I'm paying for you to go to rehab. And I was down with it because I was about to lose the house because I ain't paid the mortgage in 3 months. And so I went away to Hazelden in Minnesota. And for 30 days, I stayed out there. I came back and got clean, but I never moved back to that house because all my partners was waiting for me to get home. Let's go get a blast. Let's go get some. So Russell set up a loft for me over in Williamsburg. And over there in isolation, I really started in earnest to be an artist. I started making large canvases and I painted every day because I wasn't out on the street hustling and scrambling. I was like, let me put all of me into this. And so when I did that, I hooked up with some boys downtown, a brother named Manu and Daryl. And when we did that, we opened the gallery. He had a gallery and he brought me in as a partner. And I started Rush Fine Arts because I saw on television that they were using a lot of art and Black art in backgrounds. And so my job, and I thought my job at the time was to get art on TV shows and in plays. And I had some success at that, but it wasn't a nonprofit. So then I went again to my brother, who's always been a big supporter. I said, listen, I'm going to start a nonprofit. Will you back my move? And he said, yeah. So we had a fundraiser that he financed, Run DMC performed at it at the place called the Puck Building in New York, where they used to have the National Black Fine Art Show. And we raised $250,000 that night. And with that $250,000, I opened a gallery in Chelsea, hired people, set the whole thing up, and continued really to build upon that and develop a board of directors. And since I went to graduate school for public administration finance, I already knew how to build an organization from school and intuitively. So I just continued to build the organization. Now here we are 25 years later.
And then how did that then develop, into the poetry?
One of the things that I wanted to do with the gallery is not just show visual arts, but basically to profile all the arts. So when we had Annex, we did a weekend called Sankofa, which was called Bringing It Back. And when I did Sankofa, we had one weekend, well, the visual arts were all the way up. One weekend it was poetry, one weekend it was fashion. We had Cross Colors, Fat Farm, all the young hip hop fashion, did a fashion show. We had a Black play, we had Black music. So for the whole month, every weekend we had a different part of the arts showcase. So then when I opened up the second gallery in Clinton Hill, the Corridor Gallery, every show I would invite poets over because Clinton Hill had 1 million poets. And they had the Brooklyn Moon Cafe. And so I started going over there, meeting poets. I said, come do something at my gallery. And then Bruce George rolled up on me, who was doing the Tea Party, which was a big poetry thing. And Bruce rolled up on me and said, yo, man, we got to move poetry to the next level. And I said, well, yeah, that's fine. Go on, get on away from me. And he came back the next week with that shit. And he came back the next week. I said, all right, let's do this. So then I said, well, the easiest way to do this, they had just finished Def Comedy. I said, let's call this shit Def Poetry and take it back to HBO. Because our first thought was MTV. But then I said, the easiest way is just to go on and do what has been done the same exact way with poetry that was done with comedy. And so we started doing showcases. The first showcase was in Philly. And then we had such a huge crowd that came for it. I was surprised. I don't think Bruce was as surprised, but I was surprised that so many people across the country was into spoken word. And so then eventually we went to Russell. I said, man, I want to take the name and take it national and make a TV show out of it. And Russell said, nah, man, yeah, that's my brand. That's my money, man. I said, listen, I ain't gonna hurt your brand. And then when we did the second show, people heard about it all over the nation and started calling Def Jam offices. When is Def Poetry coming out? When is Def Poetry coming out? They had to get a whole new line for the calls about Def Poetry. And it wasn't even nothing yet. So we took it around the country and built an audience, a big brand. And then we took it to the Soul Cafe, I think the name of it was my man that was on that cop show. He lived across the street. I can't think of his name, but he was an actor. He played a cop.
Malik Yoba.
Malik Yoba had the club. Thank you, brother. I'm getting old. Malik let us use his club, and we invited HBO down to the club. And Black Ice came. And Black Ice killed it. Russell was like, damn. And he was like, because Black Ice was very hip hop. You know, Russell thought it was a bunch of hippie with dreads and backpacks and whatnot. And when he saw the hip hop part of it, then we did a big showcase that Rakim did. And Rakim killed it. And then from there, HBO gave us a showcase at the Aspen Comedy Festival because they believed it was hot, but they thought it was just Black people. And then when we showed them that the whole world was waiting for spoken word poetry, they gave us 7 shows. And it was huge. Then they gave us 11 shows. Then they gave us a full season. And then we were the biggest show on HBO until they took us off. And you know, the best explanation why they canceled it is because everybody that was going to subscribe to watch their poetry had already subscribed. So there was no new, they were still getting the watches, huge watches, but they weren't getting any new subscriptions. So they had to bring something new on. So that was the explanation we got. So that's how their poetry came about. Really, it was Bruce George getting on my nerves about helping to put this show together. And I got it, but I was so busy doing my art thing, I didn't want to get involved in Bruce's stuff. And then he was like persistent. And I liked the brother. So I said, all right, I'm down. And then from there, we put it together, put our heads together, got a sister named Deborah Pointer. Deborah Pointer took this thing and got sponsors for it so we could travel it all over the country. She got this sponsor and that sponsor and this sponsor. And the 3 of us would go to venues in Chicago and Detroit and here and there and everywhere, just building the brand until we finally made it into a TV show. And then, in my opinion, then they took it to Broadway and killed the brand. Because Broadway was not the place for Def Poetry, a 2,000-seat place. You know, we won a Tony and we won all kinds of awards, but we didn't get the street people coming. Ain't nobody was paying $60 to go see no poetry. You know, whatever the tickets were at the time. It had taken it out of the grassroots, and so it didn't really kill it, but you know, it lost its edge by being on, in my opinion. Not everybody's opinion, but in my opinion, it lost its edge by being on Broadway. I think it was an amazing thing, and I think it made history, but we sort of slowed its momentum down. We should have taken it to an off-Broadway show somewhere first. That was my opinion. But, you know, my opinion was, you know, just one of many. And so it all turned out all right, because I'm still doing, every once in a while, I'll do a Def Poetry reunion and pack a house.
Absolutely. Yeah, yep. y'all just had one not too long ago, right?
We just had one in Philly at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and we had 700 people plus standing room up in the lobby of the museum. We killed it. We killed it. They had never had that many people, especially Black people, standing around that museum in its history.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And so now, I guess with that, you know, we talked a bit about the writing, and you know, obviously poetry, but you've also written novels. I just want to go through what I found of what you've written. So 3 Days as the Crow Flies, Deep in Your Best Reflection, poems in 160 characters, and The Return of Two Dick Willie,
right?
the Brown Beatnik tomes, which now, of course, you've now done with Ron Carter and set to music, and we'll talk about that for sure. I Dreamed My People Were Calling, but I Couldn't Find My Way Home, the poetry and paintings of Danny Simmons, and House of the Spirit, the work and collection of Danny Simmons, and 85, a novel.
85 was a graphic novel. It was a comic book, a big comic book, and it's basically 3 Days as the Crow Flies changed into a graphic novel. It was the same story, but it had pictures and, you know, condensed and whatnot. And then there was the book that I did, Deaf Poetry on Broadway, where I interviewed and I talked to everybody and wrote a history of deaf poetry in this book published by Atria Books. So that's another one. So yeah, I wrote a bunch of things. I'm getting ready to sit down and try to think about writing autobiography. It scares me though. I don't really want to remember all the shit I did. But anyway.
Now I was gonna ask you though too, because you didn't have nothing to do with this though, huh?
I was in it. I didn't have nothing to do with it, but I'm in it. I think one of my poems is in it, and that's Tony Medina, ain't it?
Yep, Tony Medina, yep.
He's been a big supporter of my poetry. He's published some of it, and he's written stuff on the liner pages of my books. So, you know, Tony's been a great supporter of mine, and I love that brother.
Yeah, I've known
of course, he's been on Deaf Poetry also.
Yeah, I've known him for years. He's a great brother, and of course, the foreword on that was done by the legendary Sonia Sanchez. You know, boom. So I just wanted to say that because you know that's quite prolific. You know, that's a lot of work, both poetry and novels. You know, so that's deep, and you know that's a breath. Now I told you we were going to talk about this because, of course, the one that strikes me is The Return of Two Dick Willie. You got to explain this whole Two Dick Willie thing to me.
All right, man. Everybody keep asking me about that shit. I should have named it something else. But anyway, Two Dick Willie was a character in the Brown Beatnik tomes. He's a character that I got from a friend of mine who was a comedian, and he named one of his characters on his stage play Two Dick Willie because he was a dope fiend. His character was a dope fiend, slick magician who would have something in one hand and take something from you in the other. And so I thought of being Black in America as having two faces, something that you present to get by and who you really are with your people. And so that's the nature of the two dicks. It don't have nothing to do with sex. It's just basically two-minded. You know, they say a dick has a mind of its own. Well, there you go. I had two dicks, two minds of my own.
I fell for it like a sucker again. I thought this was a story about somebody you grew up with who had like a most fortunate deformity.
No, man. It's about the two-mindedness of being Black in America and how we have to present ourselves.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Now, so that gets us down to, you know, obviously, you know a lot of people. And, well, okay, so I guess before we go to this one, I'll ask about this one because we were talking about poetry. One of my favorite people you happen to know in the world, and that's Abiodun Oyewole from The Last Poets. Now, how do you know him?
I guess just from the poetry scene. I guess I met him mostly, personally got to know him as a friend during Deaf Poetry back then. You know, we had him on Deaf Poetry, and I think Camilla Forbes, who now runs the Apollo, or she might be beyond onto something new about it. But Camilla was a booking agent. So I grew up listening to The Last Poets when I was an early teen and teens, and I can still recite some of their poetry. I mean, it hit me that much. So I was in awe that I actually met The Last Poets. And so since then, I mean, when I do Deaf Poetry reunions, I try to include Abby and Umar to come. We've gone around the country together doing poetry. And so that's how I know Abby O'Doon, as a mentor, as somebody to be in awe of, and just somebody I could call on as a friend.
One of the most, for those who haven't met him, one of the most beautiful brothers on the planet. So gracious, so humble, just so full of love. You know, just a really great brother. I really love him, as the other brothers of the Last Poets as well, Umar and Babatunde as well. Okay, so then that brings me to Mr. Ron Carter, right? You know, how nice of you to work with a up and coming young musician and give him a chance, huh?
Man,
how did you meet him?
There was a woman that lived on my block that was working with him on a project, and he had a book that he was trying to launch, and she knew about all my books and wanted to introduce me to him to see if I could somehow help him get his book out there with my publisher, or I don't know. But she brought me to his house and introduced me to him. And I brought along a couple of books of poetry to just as a gift. And I knew his son because his son, Miles, I didn't know him well, but I knew him as a painter. And Miles, you know, I had talked, and then, you know, unfortunately, Miles passed away. And so when I gave Ron the books and he read them, we started talking about a collaboration. And the first collaboration we did was the Brown Beatnik tomes and his book. And we went to a bookstore, big bookstore in Brooklyn. And we performed, and then we sold books at the end. And it was so dynamic that my publisher approached Brick, which is a performing arts place in Brooklyn, to open their jazz festival. And Ron wanted to do it, I wanted to do it. And then my publisher went to Blue Note Records and said, Danny Simmons, who I had a name as an artist and a poet a little bit, and the guy, Don was somewhat of a fan of mine. Well, not a fan, he knew who I was, put it that way. And he of course, he knew who Ron was. Don was, what the group was and was not, and he was the head of Blue Note Records. And so he took a chance and financed the album. And so we recorded it live at Brick to open their first jazz festival. We were the opening act of their first jazz festival. And the recording came out so good that they put it out. That's basically how that happened. You know, Don loved the books, he loved the concept, he loved the sound that he heard when we presented him from the first thing that we did at the bookstore. And then he said, yeah, okay, here's the money, record this, and we'll do it. And then he became the executive producer of it, which gave it big cachet. And then we got 1 million write-ups and 1 million great reviews, and we sold a lot of records, and, you know, and, you know, we would love the opportunity to do it again. And so we're looking, my publisher and my partner is looking at figuring out how we can take this act on the road one more time. And with the new book, either To Dick Willy or the book that I'm writing called The Red Book.
Well, when this COVID thing clears up, certainly want you you guys to come here. We could work on that. I had really wanted Ron Carter to come up here really badly. I'm glad you mentioned his son, Miles, rest in peace. I knew Miles when Miles came to Boston. My other buddy, same name, Miles, from New York, was like, hey, I got a buddy moved to Boston and you should link up. And so I linked up. I just saw him maybe about a month before he died. This is his book right here. With his art. He was a bad painter, and yep, there we go right there. Yep, there we go.
Yep.
Right there.
Miles Carter.
Yep. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing and a legacy, and it's funny too with all these links, you know, to Boston. So at some point, sir, we definitely got to get you up here. As I told you to the sister Makiba McCrary from the Museum of Fine Arts, definitely trying to make that plug because you know, you need to be up here with all these universities and the museum and with the community all at the same time and drop.
I'd love to come. I'd love to come when it's safe to come.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, so that really about there really closes it up. The only thing that I would say, because we touched on it lightly, was the whole addiction thing and the recovery thing. You talked about how you came to that. I just wonder if you have any kind of words of wisdom for anybody that's struggling with addictions of any kind, and or anybody who's going through recovery. Words of encouragement.
There are a lot of different words of encouragement. I'm gonna tell you what I can't tell. What worked for me, quite frankly, was I went to the program, and then I went into aftercare. But the thing that really worked to cement my recovery was hanging out with brothers who had the same mission, staying clean. And so we used to meet 2-3 times a week. We go out and have dinner, hang out, laugh, joke, blah, 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 blah. Go to the meeting, talk, come back, stay in touch with each other. And we did this regularly for 3-4 years. I'm 28 years clean now. But we did this regularly for years, and that kept me clean. There's strength in numbers. I find it hard for people. And I was an addiction counselor after that with my social worker background for 5 years. And I found that when dealing with addiction, it is hard to do on your own. And I'm not saying that the rooms, AA, NA, is all of that, but what they do is afford you fellowship of people who are in the same struggle. And if you struggle together, it becomes a lot easier burden to carry than struggling alone. And even if they just tell you, can call them and say, man, I feel like getting a bag of dope. They could tell you, well, listen, let's go get something to eat instead of you going and get that bag of dope. And, then you got choices. If you're on your own, you can talk yourself into anything. That's for sure. You can figure out 1 million reasons to get a bag, and not figure out one, but somebody else can help you figure out why you need to stay on the road to sobriety. So, I mean, that's all I can tell you. Go to a meeting, get some friends, get a sponsor, and get a group of friends who are trying to get clean like you, and hang tight and hang close. And that's what worked for me.
All right, beautiful. And actually, too, I said we was gonna end there, but I actually missed one of my questions.
Sure.
Because we share another great love together, and that is our love of comic books. You mentioned drawing the Hulk and all that, comic books and superheroes. When I used to see you on Facebook sometime, like behind you, like all this stuff is behind me, you had a crazy collection and whatnot of everything. So, talk to us a little bit about the comics and the superheroes. And do you have a preference of like Marvel over DC, or do you just do it all?
Well, nowadays, I'm not really into superheroes as much as I used to be. I'm more into, I would say, macabre, kind of like strange things. More stuff like Image would be a big name that people would relate to, stuff like The Walking Dead and stuff like that. I sort of morphed a little bit out of superheroes about 8-10 years ago when I started reading books that had, different kinds of things. I mean, superheroes for me got very complicated. Everybody had about 27 plots, and you had to follow it for 400 years, and it got tedious. So I started reading stuff like, right now I'm reading a book called Gideon Falls. I'm reading a book called Faithless. There's a whole lot of comic books that touch on the supernatural that I like. But I've been reading comic books. I started reading comic books when I was about 8, and I stopped reading them in my early 20s. And then my son was born, and when he became a teen, he started reading early teen or late, like 8 or 9 at the same time. I started picking them up again because I would take them to the comic book store, and then I got hooked again. And so I've been reading comic books most of my life, man. I enjoy it. It's a great, I wouldn't say escape, but it's a great relief. It takes you someplace else, just like any other book. Except for this got pictures, this got color, this got things going on. It got, it has liberties that most novels. It's quick. You read the book, you move on to the next one. So, I mean, I enjoy them. I go to comic book, or did go to the comic book store every Wednesday, pick up my books and spend Wednesday afternoon reading comics. Now I go maybe once a month. They hold them for me and I pick them up and I still read them. But one of the great things about comics is going to the comic book store and seeing all the geeks, because there ain't no kids in there. They're all grown men. And kids can't afford $4 a book. So, but you know, the whole world, all my friends, not all, but a good deal of my friends, you know, artists and whatnot, still read comics. We talk about comics. So it's a little group of us that are comic book heads. So, you know, that's fun too, to be a part. Like I said, being a part of a group of something always is fun.
All right. And another question too, you know, dealing with your brothers as well. Now, we know formerly one of my top 10 MCs who's never listed in the top 10 MCs, Run, right?
Mm-hmm.
Run, now Rev Run, is obviously a Christian, right? Russell is he a Buddhist? Is it fair to say he's a Buddhist?
It's fair to say he's a Buddhist, yeah, I guess.
Because I didn't know if he's like a Taoist or what, I don't know, you know.
More like a yogi.
Okay.
You know, I think that's all part of it, the spiritual part of it. But most of it is his practice of meditation and yoga and this, that, and the other. I don't know, and those all have spiritual principles. So I think he's more into the spiritual principles things than declaring himself part of a religion. But I could be wrong. But that's what I see.
And so I was getting to, do you have any kind of spiritual system or practice that you deal with?
Not really. Do I believe in a higher power? Yes. I'm spiritual in of that. I believe there's a spiritual connection between human beings and a spiritual connection to something greater than ourselves that connect us all together. I don't go to church. I haven't gone to church. I wasn't Episcopal. I was as a child. I was an altar boy, you know, and you know, all of that good stuff. I went to church every Sunday until I was old enough to rebel and not go. But yeah, man, I believe in a spiritual practice. I think that, once again, the feeling of autonomy of a human being, I think even if you look at your spiritual connection, spiritual guidance or spiritual higher power as each other, I think we need to be connected to something. I don't think it makes really that much difference of what it is. I think that you have to have something that binds you to the universe, other than, well, I'm me and the universe is there. I think the connection between all of us is the strongest thing we could possibly have. So,
and that is obviously inherently good, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And who am I talking to? Because it's the first time I seen you eating.
But I'm enjoying it.
Man, you over here eating and I can't eat, man.
Yeah, man, I'm here from Georgia.
How you doing, brother?
I'm Don.
Nice to meet you, bro.
Yeah, nice
Please, welcome.
You,
and that's
man,
probably
you got some books behind you, brother.
Yeah, that's just the background for Zoom, one that I chose.
Oh, okay.
I started to bring up the
you were
Paw
very
Patrol.
learned, brother.
I started to bring up hey, you're talking about comics, man. I started to bring up the Paw Patrol.
the Paw Patrol. I hear that, man. Nice meeting you, man.
Yeah, nice meeting you too.
And so this is a good time for us to now open it up for a couple of questions. We're gonna do maybe 10, 15 minutes of questions and you know, comments or whatever. Please, you know, keep it brief, keep it succinct. Obviously, you know how we do, so we're gonna keep it classy and black too. If you're on mute, you gotta unmute yourself. I see your mouth moving.
Bet. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I can hear you.
Bro, what's up, man?
How you feeling, my brother?
Man, good, man. I got a lot of questions to ask you, but I'm not going to get too deep. But I do want to touch on some of the, you know, we go back and forth with politics. You know, we agree with probably 9 out of 10, but we just go crazy on that one we can't agree with. So, you know, put the whole house on fire over those two we can't agree on. But listen,
that's all right.
It's all right, man.
That's all right.
So, with art and advocacy in the spirit of Emory Douglas, the spirit of BLM, what's going on right now in these streets, with abstract art not being representational, where where can we get our artists involved, or how do artists get involved in the struggle that we're going on with right now? Because I'm not seeing that same opportunity that they had, in the 70s.
I think that it's more on curators to look for artists, to direct artists to create things around social. I mean, artists can create social consciousness work, but I think the opportunity to show it needs to be there for it to proliferate. And so I think that we need to have our curators look to not only do work that's politically sourced, but to always include. Right now, I'm in the middle of, and I think you might have read about it on Facebook, that I'm curating about 25 artists for Tribes magazine, along with Ishmael Reed, who's curating a number of literary pieces on Black Lives Matter. At Rush, every once in a while, I've had one uniquely political show at Rush in Philadelphia, where we definitely talk about. It was called Gorilla in the Mist. It's about, being the subversiveness of art. But I think we need our curators to look upon. One of the things I think that is happening is that the market, the commercial market, is not really as attuned to political art usually as it is to art that's different from political. I don't know what else to call it, but different from political art. Like to sell political art, I've always found, unless you find the right buyer, it's not as commercially viable, because it's talking about hard subjects. And you don't necessarily want to come home and see hard subjects on your wall every day, unless you're that kind of guy, right. Or woman. But I think curators need to push the fact that art is could be the biggest avenue of social change that we have.
So with respect to, say, like the Glenn Ligons and Kara Walkers who have, controversial, you might want to say it's not political and maybe how you and I might see it, right? You know what I mean? But there is an appetite for a certain type of art that speaks to controversy, right? Is there?
There is. Hank Willis Thomas all the time.
Yeah. So.
And I don't know. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying from our once you start doing that, there's room for Hank and there's room for Kara. Kara's more historical, but it still speaks to the same message of injustice and inequity, and so does Glenn Ligon, and there's a lot of people. But when you look at those in relationship to how wide the market is of art, then they're really a minority of artists doing that, because they find that it's harder to sell, unless you're Hank or somebody else, and you're known for that sort of thing.
And that representation, you don't have a Thelma Golden behind you, then it becomes even more difficult, right?
Well, I don't know about Thelma Golden, but Thelma Golden's a step in the chain of going up into the commercial art world. Thelma Golden and the Studio Museum is a great launching pad, as Rush has been a great launching pad to get to where Thelma. At one time it was Rush, Studio Museum, and then out into the commercial art world. And still we're launching careers. So, but like a lot of artists Black artists speak to Black issues, but not necessarily the hard issues of Black power, Black liberation. They speak to Black history, social issues, but not protests and this, that, and the other.
I think that's
in my opinion. I'm one opinion.
Right. I think that was my regard to like abstract artists. How do abstract artists get in that equation? It's a little more difficult when your work's not representational. You know what I mean? So separating the art from the advocacy.
I'm in curating this Tribes magazine, I want to include abstract art that I feel touches upon those things. And then you know, if it's not directed by a title, then you might miss the theme that the art, and a lot of times abstract art has to be explained what the artist's intention is in order for you to get it. We have one woman, her name is Grace Pollard, who does abstract art that you can see is very political. It has fire in it, it has protest in it, and you can see it because she's very intentional of making sure that she talked about war, she talked about protest, this, that, and the other, and she did it in abstract terms. But if you didn't realize what my art was about, if I didn't sit there and tell you, you know, you might just see circles and lines and this, and you might not see the connection to spirituality, Africa, and bringing it all the way to the present, unless you sit down and have a conversation. You say, oh, now I understand what you're talking about, and then they will see it every time. But sometimes people are not that informed about art and movements and this. They know what they like. They not necessarily know why they like it. So art has to be, huh?
No, you can finish, but that brings you to my last question. But finish up what you were going to say, bro.
Art sometimes has to be explained by the artist to give clues to lead people into what's being said. And that has even more so with abstract art. Okay,
so here's the last question. I grew up in Boston. We had a center called the Elmer Lewis School of Fine Arts. And so from a young boy, from 7, 8 years old, I was introduced to, you know, to art. John Wilson was my teacher, Richard Yard. So I grew up, Babatunde Alatunji was my African drum teacher. So, you know, there was a lot of things going on in the late 60s, early 70s that connected art, Black culture to the community. We're not seeing, whether it's the South Side, you know, South Side in Chicago. I'm not exactly sure in New York, you know, what they had, which is the Deuceable. I know that Joe Overstreet and Ken Caliber in New York. I know that Camille Billups, you know, rest in peace to both of those Black artists, were heavily involved in the movements. Mark Pierre at Northeastern University. What can we do now? There is this void. We're losing a lot of these artists. They're leaving us, man.
The older artists, yes, we are.
Oh, we're doing these. I mean, Jack Whitten. I mean, it's hurt. It's hurtful, you know, to see these people leave, and it seems like there's only a small group of people that know who these people are, you know, and their contributions, you know, they're going to go to the marketplace. But in terms of what they mean to our communities and where they came from, these type of community centers, you know what I'm saying?
Of course.
That's what I've seen Rush has meant, you know, for me. How do we right now, tomorrow, next week, start connecting some of that philanthropic energy into the existing African-American art centers that actually, some of them are burgeoning. You got these big, beautiful centers growing up around the country, but I'm not necessarily seeing a relationship to communities, advocacy. It's something different going on. You know what I mean? And
everybody, artists nowadays, at least in my opinion, are more concerned about their market than their message.
Man.
Right.
Man.
You know, everybody wants to be a superstar artist. Everybody wants to get paid. And back in the days, it was about uplifting Black people. Now it seems to me, and I'm not casting any aspersions, that Black images and Black art is about what's saleable in the marketplace and not necessarily what's being made to speak to us. It's Black, you know what I used to say? Black art's being made to speak to white people.
Yeah.
Man,
before Black, and that's a wide net I'm saying there. Before it used to be Black art was being made to speak to ourselves, but once Black art became commercial, then who buys it? At $40,000 a painting, $30,000 a painting. Who's buying that? It ain't us. You know, I offered a dude $7,000 to create a small painting for me, and he directed me to a print. $7 motherfucking $1,000.
I don't even want to get into like me and my collective friends. Our conversations like it's crazy.
I ain't got it like that. I'm an artist, man.
Hey, listen, man. Shoot, don't even want to get into it. So, but you know, for me, it's more around our young people being introduced to the arts, right?
That's what
My
I try
love
to
for the
do.
arts is drawn right to that moment. You know what I mean? It didn't come out of anywhere.
Right.
Our young brothers and sisters, they definitely got hip hop and poetry. It's there. But in terms of the visual arts, man, woof, there's a dearth, man. It's like a desert.
Well, that's why Rush is there, to make sure that there is someplace, you know, for us to send our kids. I mean, I'm not making a whole lot of noise because I ain't got a whole lot of money, but that's the whole point. I see art centers like Rush that are placed in the middle of Black communities, not only as art galleries and places for art, but places for community to be uplifted, you know. And so I think art is a great uplifter of our community. And so when somebody sees that somebody drops a gallery in their neighborhood and they have artists in there, they teaching their kids, it elicits pride.
Absolutely.
You're walking by with your kid and you look in there and you see, what's that? These people that in the neighborhood I'm going, they're just starting to realize that they can come in the door, because nobody's told them art's for them. Poor people don't know art's for them unless it's a poster or something, but you know, some commercial art. And when we welcome in the door, how much I gotta pay? You know, because they have not been there. And then when they leave, I'm so glad you're here. Can we come back? Can I bring friends back? And the answer is yes. So, you know, the whole point of this whole thing is we need to use art as a tool to right some of the wrongs that are in our community. Absolutely. And that's my whole point. I ain't there trying to make no money. I ain't made no money in 30 years of running Rush. I ain't never had a salary in my life. I haven't had a salary since I quit social work. So, you know, I'm a hustler, baby, as Jay-Z said. But it definitely ain't hustling art. What I'm trying to do is hustle for the community. I'm not trying to make no money off of Rush Arts. I ain't never made no money on it. And I don't think that's my mission. My mission has been to, what can I do for artists and kids in the community? Because that's what my daddy told me. This is what you got to do. He had a word. It's incumbent with his Howard University, Baltimore. It's incumbent upon you, Dan, to give something back. Right. And so in that, Russell and Run have helped me throughout the years to give something back. I've been the point man for the family of giving something back. You know, when I needed money, Russell would give it to me, not for me, but for the community. You know, when I built my first gallery, Russell gave me money. You know, when I sold my house in Brooklyn, I took half the money and started Rush. Wow. And you know what I sold Brownstone for. So I bought that whole building. There is no mortgage. We will have Rush because I'll make sure that we're going to have Rush. Now, you know, if I don't have operating money, I'll try to find it. And the community has been great with my Facebook fundraisers and this little fundraiser, you know. And so I'm able to raise the money to pay some salaries. But we got that building. That's ours. That's our communities. That's my gift to the community.
What's up?
And now on that tip too, I wanna move on, get some more questions for some other people, and particularly with a specific focus on, I think we got some young artists on here. So if we have some young artists on here, let's get some more questions from some young people. Please, anybody who's on here, young artists, please don't be shy, speak up. If not, anybody else who has some more questions, let's get at it as we, you know what I mean, we're closing out on time wise. So get your questions in, please.
Hi there. I'm not a youngin, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for hosting this discussion, Jamal. And Danny, I wanted to mention to you that one of my favorite scenes in the movie, the Black Panther, was when at the museum and a woman was trying to explain, you know, where she, you know, stole her piece from or whatever. And the film itself just was perfect to me. Just all of the imagery, all of the tribes represented, just, it was just beautiful. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on taking art and putting it into media to the mainstream? Like, what were your that?
I think it's a wonderful idea. I mean, listen, it reaches so many people that a gallery or one location can't do. You know, one thing that it does happen that to make something commercial, you sort of water it down, but the message still gets through, you know, and there was so much pride generated from that movie. You know, even though it's a fictional movie about a superhero, it still instilled a lot of pride in at a fictional place, Wakanda. But it's like, oh, and little kids, and even little white kids, everybody wanted to be the Black Panther. You know, it crossed over lines, it brought people together, and it gave a lot of pride. I think that anytime we have opportunity to do art and to also figure out a way to get it to the masses, I think we should do it and try to stay as close as we can to what's real. But if we got to stretch it a little bit in order to get the overall overreaching message to folks, then stretch it a little bit so we can, so folks can say, I want to be the Black Panther. There's a Black superhero. Oh my God, all I grew up knowing about until the Black Panther came out in 1967 or 66, I forget what year, was Superman and Batman. Right. You know, and the white superhero, when I had the Black superhero, I lost my mind. And so these kids seeing the Black Panther, they lost their minds too.
Wow, thank you.
You're welcome, sister.
Hey, brother Danny.
Yo, what's up?
How you doing, sir? I remember many years ago, I performed with you back in it was somewhere in New Hampshire. I don't know if you remember me, but
your face is very familiar. What's your name, man?
They call me VCR.
Okay. What you did? Was it New Hampshire?
I believe it was New Hampshire. It was me and a couple of two sisters. One was named Crystal Johnson, and the other one was Natural Bliss. I don't know if she was a rapper.
Yeah, I think I remember that. That was back in the early 2000s, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah.
So
you still doing poetry, man?
I'm still doing poetry. In fact, I've been doing this open mic event called Verbalization, which is the longest running open mic spot in Boston for over 20 years.
Oh, that's wonderful, man.
Yes, sir.
That's wonderful.
So my question, and I also connected with Bruce George this year as well. He got that movement, Genius is Common.
Genius is Common. Yeah, I just did a little video for Bruce, man.
Yes, sir. So we've been connecting with that as well. So my question was there any type of attempt to bring Gil Scott-Heron to deaf poetry?
Gil took the money and got high. I told him don't give Gil the money.
Damn, come on. Man.
Oh Lord Jesus. Gil was supposed to, he showed up late after the taping. But the joke was he took the money and got out. I really don't know if he did that. That's a joke. But Gil got the money, and when he came, we were packing up to leave. And he was like, are y'all ready? You know, Gil and I, he had left Lincoln University the year before I came there. And but he had a girlfriend or somebody he was dating at Lincoln. So I met Gil and hung out with him quite a bit in my freshman year at Lincoln, before I got kicked out of Lincoln. And but Gil was an amazing talent. Amazing talent. So yeah, we tried to have him on the show, and he showed up, but he didn't make it in time. But the joke was Gil took that money. But yeah, Gil's okay. He's a wonderful person and moved the poetry so far forward. And he's another one who took it to another level outside of the cafes and this and that with his albums and everything. It was like he was the next generation after the last poets.
Thank you so much, brother.
Anybody else got some questions? All right. I got a question. You think we can convince Russell to make a poetry record label?
Russell's so far out of music, man. If it ain't got nothing to do with some yoga or some, man, he built a whole yoga retreat over in Bali. He's over there, man, living his best life. doing yoga videos from Bali every day, man. And having, he got all these people coming to his place to do yoga with him. And he ain't doing no more music.
God bless him. All right. So any more questions? Any more questions?
I got one.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dondre. I'm one of the young people in the room. So my main question is like, what's some advice that you have for a young person who is, I'm involved in the arts as well, but I make music. So I'm more so like audio and a little bit visual arts. So, but like, I believe in that quote that you just said about how some artists are more concerned with their market rather than the message. What's the advice that you have for the artist who's more concerned with their message rather than the market?
The same advice I would have for anyway, find your original voice, something that's uniquely you, and push that and develop that. Please, if you want to be good, then follow other people. If you want to be great, then find your center and find what your voice is saying and how you want to say it and push that. And, you have to get out there in the mix. Like my man got an open mic. You should show, and you're doing music, you should show up there and see what you can do with that. I don't know if he's only poetry. A lot of open mics allow people to do different things, but you have to show up, man. Same thing with painting. People ask, how do I get into, the art game? Show up at galleries, show up at places, and push yourself and push people to listen to you. It's work. It's work. There's no magic bullet. You have to be in it. That catchphrase, you gotta be in it to win it, but you gotta be in the place so people know that you're doing it. It's not gonna happen unless you show up. That's the best I can tell you, man.
Definitely, I appreciate that for sure.
All right.
You look like a man with a plan. I see what you got on your wall in the back there. You got little notes all strung together, so you're doing something right.
There you go.
I got a little something up there,
All right. All right. Anybody else got some questions?
Well, so I feel like he just answered 3 of mine with that answer. So I'm gonna just get to the other ones, because my other ones were about, what is the advice for space makers? I have a friend who's he has a comic book and he wants to tell authentic stories that are not being told from a perspective that is being neglected, but he's just hesitant. So, what was the advice for it? And, you already said nothing to it but to do it. So we'll pass that on.
I mean, with that, I know a lot of independent comic book producers who are, using crowdsourcing to actually publish their books and then get out there at the festivals and this, that, and sell it. And a lot of them have gotten some play from independent publishers like Milestone, not Milestone, I can't think of it, Image and other things. Once you get it out there, but you got to produce it. It got to be more than an idea. You have to have something in your hand, or at least now something digitally.
Yes, sir. And so then, because the way I was going to segue into that, but I just threw myself all the way off. But there was a series, Martha Washington Goes to War, and it was.
I'm waiting for my new copies. I bought those.
Yeah, so I was wondering what your perspective was on a story like that, because when you were talking about getting into graphic novels more on like a, kind of what's going on in the world and less on a superhero thing, that's what came to my brain with that. And then
actually, I'm waiting on the Harriet Tubman books, the Harriet Tubman comic books to come up. Not Martha Washington. I remember Martha Washington. She had a short blonde hair. Yeah, I read those books back in the days. Yeah.
And then my last thing is just so, as somebody who does a lot of behind the scenes work and, tries to curate shows around, police brutality, we had the last one we did was, Freedom Through Art, and we linked up with a collective that does work around supporting incarcerated artists and getting their work out there. Just, back to that thing of, really building that infrastructure. How do we attack that? Because I think in Boston, that's a consistent problem of we don't, we have great ideas, we have great work, we have people willing to do it, but there are certain barriers. I guess, what is your suggestion to folks around how do you attack those barriers? Collectively, you know what I mean?
Well, if there's one thing we learned from this pandemic is that the world lives inside of this computer now. And so I think the way you build an audience is through mediums like this, and pushing the message out through social media and other ways. One of the things I found out, and that, I guess I could say found out, is that when we started doing our children's program virtually, that we started getting kids from all over the country signing in on Saturday morning, instead of just the kids from the neighborhood. And so even when we open the gallery back up, we're going to continue to reach out nationally. We have to start, thinking about our movement as really beyond the physical space of where we want to be. Our movement is ideas, basically. And so the deeper we can penetrate with the ideas of social change and movement is the better for us. Bodies showing up at demonstrations and things like that is great, but really the fight is in the hearts and minds of people. And so what we have to do is get the message out. And what you need to do is get people who are able to relate that message in dynamic fashion through their art, through their music. You can't just get up on a soapbox and preach. What you need to do is put up this rapper who's talking social change. You need to create a program around social change agents who are talking about, here's my painting about social change, here's my composition about social. We got a little one-act play, and engage people through mediums that they're interested in and talk about the issues that need to be talked about. And I think once you start getting them there, then you start seeing change, and they talk about it to other people. Change is going to come, I think, nowadays through this medium. And we lose street fights. We're going to lose a street fight. They got guns, they got tanks, they got this, that, and the other. We're going to lose a street fight. I was the Black Panthers when I was a kid, and I busted cops. I threw bricks through cop car windows, this, that, and the other. I ended up being in jail when I was a kid for that sort of thing. But at least at that time, we thought we had a revolution in the street. Now it's a revolution that's going to have to happen within cyberspace, where you are able to talk to people and have people talk to other people. We have to change the mind. This country is so divided that 50% of the country believes this, and the other 50, the progressives are small, but it's so divided that we need to move people to new ideas and new things. And that's not going to happen, in the streets. That's going to happen by putting out messages through social media and other forms, digitally and virtually. That's my opinion.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do we use the system?
Thank you,
It sounds to me like resources is a major issue. Certainly ideas, it begins with ideas, but to get those ideas in front of our kids, in front of society, such that perhaps, because we're living in an age now where many people don't want to be informed. But how can we use the system in order, or our politicians in some way, to gain resources to get those ideas out in front of, and even pushing it from using the system or infiltrating the system with those ideas through education, through our educational system. Because one of the major problems we have now in this country is the average American can't tell you much about democracy. That's because we don't teach civics.
Well, this is true.
When you and I grew up, we learned civics. Would you not agree with that?
I agree exactly with what you said. But one of the things that we're going to have to do is really, I think, is engage local politicians that you have control over, and engage local institutions where you can put on things. You need, you have, like, if somebody came to me at Rush, in my little place at Rush, people come to me all the time. Can we put on this? Can we use the gallery for this, for that? And we open it up to them, so that they can use it. You need to see what resources are at your disposal where you can get your message out, and then you need to invite the politicians. Since I've been in Philly, I've connected with a number of politicians here who are in support of what we do over there. There's no other cultural resource for miles in any direction in the neighborhood that I put that down in. We need to go where we're needed. So, you find yourself people you can align with and institutions you can align with, and then bring an agenda that's already packaged and say, can we do this here? It helps build them, or brings them new constituents, and allows you to do what you need to do. That's the only thing I got.
Yeah. And also establish what is the goal. So I live by establishing goals, and what I do, I look at what I do to see if it's pointing toward accomplishing that goal. If establish certainly the ideas you have, but establish what is your goal, and then start to think about different ways in which you can attack in order to reach that goal. And don't ever get your mind or your sight off that goal.
Well, you see, that's really what's important, is to make realistic goals. I mean, people approach social liberation from a very wide standpoint, but you can only be effective in so many areas. So you need to say, I'm going to attack this. That's why I chose art. You know, I said, I think I can make a difference in art.
Right.
And so that's why, and so I've stayed in this lane, and I think I've made some sort of difference. You have to pick a lane, stay in it and keep pushing it. You know, it ain't always going to go your way, but once you get your lane and you know what you think is important to you to accomplish, then you start bringing people to the table that believe in what you believe in.
Right. Thank you for that.
Okay.
All right, y'all. I think we're gonna wind it up right there. Mr. Danny Simmons has been so gracious with his time.
Well, it's been fun talking to y'all.
Yeah, man.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, bro. I mean, this is a powerful, in-depth conversation. And as I said, when we get rid of the vid or the Rona, what have you, we want to get you here in the flesh. There's a lot of people up here that it's all 6 degrees of separation and whatnot. My brother Greg was saying, the guy that you were talking about, Hank, the artist y'all were talking about,
Hank Willis Thomas?
He's actually doing the Martin Luther King Memorial here in the Boston Commons, the big embrace thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's doing that here in the Commons and whatnot. And a lot of these organizations that Ipiana mentioned, Elmer Lewis School is closed now, but the National Center of Afro-American Artists lives on, and Barry Gaither and the folks from AMARP are still around, and up here we got Paul Goodnight and Ralph Beach, and it just would be great, I think, to line up all them dots and connect and make sure that everybody is networking, and once again to get you here in the flesh as soon as possible. So
I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. So thank you again, my brother.
All right, now.
Much love to you and the family. One thing, if I may say too, another little heartbreaking television moment for me. One of your nieces, right, Vanessa, was having a moment of doubting about if she was in fact beautiful or not, right?
When was this?
This was on television one time. It was another time I felt, television, and she was talking about whatever, she didn't feel beautiful. Another time I wanted to cry. So I'll leave you with the joke. All the Simmons are beautiful. I think y'all hide the ugly ones in the basement or something. What are y'all doing?
We ain't got no ugly ones, man.
There you go.
Bruh. Peace.
All right. God bless you, brother. Thank you so much.
God bless, man.
Thank y'all, man.
All right. Be safe.
Thank you.
Connection, man.
All right.
Right here.
Peace.
The baby hasn't eaten because Daddy's been on a conference call.
Baby, you.